Hello and welcome to Thursday, was it the 8th of September. Let me just check that it is the 8th of September. Yes, Thursday the 8th of September, the day, and in fact the hour by the looks of it, that I heard of the death of the Queen of England. Yeah, it's one of those weird days. I don't have two cameras for this, so I'm just going to do this with a single camera. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's been sort of on the cards for a couple of days, or a day at least, so I'm certainly not surprised at the news. And yeah, it's one of those weird things. So I'm just going to get on and set this thing up. And I've done all the electrics, if you recall. Maybe you don't recall, maybe I haven't. I've just done it off camera. I'm forgetting myself, sorry. So yeah, I'm going to get on and set it up, just get my actions set right. So let's check the relief first. Okay, a little bit, that's good. A little bit high there. Yeah, so HM the Queen. It's one of those weird things because I have never been comfortable with the idea of a royalty. This is just as low as it will go on here, so I'm just going to luckily stop there. But anyway, yeah, the royalty thing. I'm not a revolutionary hothead or whatever. I think the whole thing of by the way, sorry, before we go any further, the reason I'm filthy is because I've just made our fridge conked out today, on the day of Her Majesty's passing. Our fridge conked out, well, yesterday, and we were sort of panicking, trying to figure out how we'd afford another one, because I don't know about you folks, but I don't have a spare 500 quid. Now, all of this probably comes into the old conversation about Her Majesty, the old-fashioned Queen. So, despite having lived a long time, I have no meaningful reserves that I can draw on. I'm very much one of the just about managing types, and because of my wife's not good health, it's just my income, well, a little bit of help from her incapacity type stuff, but it's, I'm the only one who can go out and do outside jobs, and yeah, so we don't have a lot, and you never hear me complaining about it because I'm not unhappy about it. It's a blessing to be able to do what I love to do, and have the freedom to do it when I want to do it as well, which is something. It's kind of, you might say, oh, we're going to twist the subject round to this one, but it's relevant because it's something those royal type of people just don't have. So, not only wouldn't I change my setup for a lot of money, I wouldn't change places with them, and I don't envy the royals, and I never envied Elizabeth II, Windsor. Just a very difficult thing to have, to be born into that as a sort of sentence, no chance of choosing it, or no way of choosing it, not that much way of getting out of it. Low spot. Yeah, in her world, you inherited it, and it was a huge furore and scandal if you turned it down. But anyway, so back from Her Majesty the Queen, back to our fridge breaking yesterday, and I've no idea what it was or why it broke, and we sort of pulled it out of its shite infested, gunge infested layer. You know how most of us have fridges that live in some sort of tiny little space, which, you know, although the manufacturer always says, do not push this anywhere near a wall, you know, they kind of think you're going to have some sort of Scandinavian lodge, you know, with tons of freestanding space and, you know, a kitchen, loads of room everywhere, and probably have units just standing up on their own like monoliths. Anyway, like all of us, our fridge stood in a hot little corner with no real space to breathe, just like everything. And yeah, yesterday I decided that was it. And so it didn't make any protest, it didn't flash any warnings, it just started getting warm. And by last night, you know, the stuff in the fridge part was noticeably warm. Nothing we could do seemingly made any difference, not that it was very obvious what you could do anyway. So we sort of, I don't know, we weren't quite sure if the freezer bit was broken as well, whether that was, there was a bit of water started to maybe thaw or something, could have been from defrosting a little bit. So I think it was defrosting somewhat, that's my theory, because there was a bit of kind of water, melt water from the glacier of the freezer. Anyway, and it wasn't a cheapy fridge, it was a nice hot point thing, so it had frost free, etc. And I am absolutely not grumbling about my lot in life regarding this fridge, because we'd had it 10 years, and I think that's a pretty fantastic pile of service from a piece of white kitchen equipment. Anyway, so yeah, it kind of was saying to us that it had had its day, really. So I think last night we left it last night with just the view of with a view of trying to see whether the freezer part was actually broken or not, and in which case the whole thing would be declared dead. Not that you can really carry on accommodating a freezer only with no fridge part. Anyway, so this morning I did a bit more sort of fiddling around with it, and by about lunchtime I suddenly found it was making a bit of vibrating kind of noise, and it sort of looked like it had got a little bit of I don't know, activity going on. And we cleaned everything out, of course, and we dragged it out onto solid ground, because even the place where it stood wasn't even flat surface in the kitchen. It was a sort of bit below the floorboard level, sort of. Anyway, we'd never had enough to fit in there, so we dropped it off it kind of fell off a ledge into this lower space. So we cleaned up all the cobwebs and the weird things that had fallen down and been lost for decades, you know, down the side of the fridge, and never been kind of found before. And so about midday or something, it started to make a little bit of a sort of interesting noise, like it was coming back to life. And a couple of hours later, lo and behold, things were getting cold again. So it seems like it's come back to life. The problem is it's probably killed. It was off for at least 24 hours, so I think it's killed our freezer full of stuff. But apparently it's covered on household insurance, so thank God for that. But anyway, so we spent quite a bit of today worrying about where to get the money out of the blue to buy a new one. It's a sort of 500 quid out of thin air expense, which just isn't something you're ready for. Certainly not in the just about managing. And then, of course, alongside of that, I started to hear of the rumours from whatever that place is called, Balaclava, no, Baikonur, no, that's the space station. where did Balmoral, immoral. Anyway, yeah, and I was pretty sure that that was it. It was just a matter of time with all the family arriving to pay their respects and so forth. So it's no surprise to me that she's gone today. And it was, you know, that thing of hereditary privilege. When I was younger, it was always something I felt bad about. You know, my life was never easy in terms of money. I mean, I wasn't born into money and never was very good with it. A little bit more on these low strings. Yeah, so you know, I remember as a youngster, sort of struggling my way through sort of student life on the fringes of London, staying in Putney, and I'd walk up the King's Road with my girlfriend at the time, and money was really tight and life was not easy, and I didn't have a moneyed family to I could depend on for anything. I used to see the kind of vast money that was just sloshing around in Chelsea and, you know, on the King's Road and that sort of Fulham place, and, you know, the huge great sports cars purring around and just this ostentatious displays of money, and obviously a lot of it inherited, and, you know, who knows. But I used to struggle with that because life seemed hard, and I suppose it's a very simple thing that when sometimes when you're young, as I was, and inexperienced and didn't really know who I was, rather than find out what I was able to do and take, you know, empower myself a bit more, I would feel bad about it and envious, I suppose. And it was not a nice feeling. I didn't like it at all. But, you know, I have to admit to it because it was there, and it was quite poisonous. But, you know, as I've got older, I look at the Royals and I think, what a truly awful package it is. You know, that some things that you see when you're younger and you're not as maybe aware of what everything's about. You know, you just see we're going on endless travel, never worried about your freezer breaking down or your fridge breaking and wondering where you're going to find the money to buy another one, and so on and so forth. And you know, it can be easy to start thinking that these people must have a life of Riley. But then, as I grew older and began to make decisions that really were a lot more about safeguarding my own freedom to have time to myself, not freedom to, you know, buy things, but freedom to choose when and where, how I worked, and also when and where I did things. You know, and as I got more into doing that, the whole thing about envying the Royals in any way just went out the window. I mean, not only didn't I envy them, I suppose at the same time I also started to really, not respect exactly, it's not the right word, but recognise what the work they had to do, even if you know, the material stuff seemed easy. You know, I tried to, well, I don't have to try hard to imagine what it would be like to be, you know, let's say Harry or somebody, or William, who, you know, you don't have a morning to yourself. Well, maybe Harry does a little bit, but, you know, more often than not, everything you do is checked in with your, you know, your secret service, and all of that stuff, and you are property of the state, and looked after as an asset of the state, you know, because that's how the royal family has always been. It's a business that is owned by the nation, and that funny part is it doesn't really mean you and me, but it just means by the mechanism that is nationhood. You know, Britain owns the monarchy, not you, me, or even them. And so as a result of that, those people have no freedom to just decide, oh, today, you know what, I can't face it, I'm going to do nothing, I'm going to lie in my hammock the whole day. I think some people think they have an infinite freedom to do that, and maybe once in a while they can do a version of it, and sure, you know, their version of it may look pretty glamorous compared to ours, so, you know, their version might be, right, that's it, I'm going to Maldives for 3 weeks, pretend to be on a trade delegation or something, I don't know, whatever, but it's not the same as just being able to look outside and decide, that's it, I'm going to swing in the hammock and listen to rubbish on radio for a few hours and just do nothing. So, you know, and to be recognised everywhere, to be sort of whispered about everywhere, to be everyone anticipating your arrival, changing everything for your arrival, everyone knowing that you're there, everybody knowing what you're doing. You know, one of the things that, sorry for bringing this up, one of the things that really bugged me, hearing the other day, you know, that Russia's obviously been in the news, and there's much more of a focus on Putin and his people that carry his nuclear, what am I, American? Nuclear football buttons around, whatever the hell it is, the thing that he carries around. And there was this rumour, whether it's true or not, at the time, that when Putin goes abroad, somebody has to scoop up his poop and take it back to Russia with them. He never leaves his poop in a foreign country in case they analyse it and, I don't know, ascertain something about his health. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but there's probably a bit of truth to it, that it's considered, you know, and I always used to be fascinated how in the medieval days, I've read quite a lot of the history, in those olden times, the king, you know, there was somebody in charge of the king's chamber pot, effectively, you know, because of course it wasn't a private affair that you could tuck yourself away and have a you know, read of your viz book or something, Your Majesty. Oh no, you had somebody there who knew you were going there, was waiting for you, probably chatted with you about issues of state while you were there, and who knows, possibly scooped up your offerings and all that kind of stuff. So it's just, in a way, the modern royals aren't really that different from that. There is so little privacy that goes with what they are born into, and you know, I think personally, I think that Harry had the right idea to turn it down, because I think they should have a chance to turn it down if it really doesn't appeal to them. And actually, certainly now it wouldn't appeal to me. Maybe it would have done if I'd been born into that and it was fairly normal. But anyway, I don't think it has changed much. So the fact that even then in the in the 16th century or whenever. I'm thinking about the king was the property again of the country in a way, and his, even though, you know, again, sort of when the king is portrayed as powerful in, you know, various stories and histories, you know, he still didn't have any choice. You know, he had to produce male children, and he had to do X, Y, and Z. It was all you know, set out for him, really. So tough life. Okay, so what I have done is I have levelled the frets. I have, I'll tell you what I will do, I think, on this one. I'm just going to run a sandpaper down the edge, because they're a bit, some of them are a bit rugged or thingy, uneven, something like that. Anyway, but yeah, so yes, it's the end of a very old era, you know, and I suppose I was very much born into the second Elizabethan era. She'd been the queen for 10 years when I was born, so she was a young woman at the time, and you know, there's only been a single royal on the throne in the whole of the time I've been alive. But actually, you know, I have to say it doesn't really make much difference to me, because I've never really been that interested in them and what they do or don't do. Even while I have, you know, some respect for how hard some of them work or have worked, I still don't respect, particularly don't like the whole idea of a hereditary monarchy. Just, you know, the need to elevate somebody up to a certain position for not having done anything, simply for being born into a clan. And I know it's incredibly common, and it's shared by other mammals and probably other animals, non-mammals too. The idea of high and low born, you know, even in the 21st century, we don't seem to have got past that, which I find really weird, actually. You know, I watch. I'm a monkey fan. I watch some channels, two channels from Hong Kong, which just offer a view into the lifestyle of some various macaque monkey troops in the hills above Hong Kong. And what's really interesting about watching them is that they have high and low born social statuses, and they're very, very powerful. And the problem that really interests me is I can't find out what it's based on, what, if anything, it's based on, because I've tried looking for studies on it, and they don't seem to tell me what I need to know. So I'm just really curious. But they do have, the macaques have a very, very hierarchical society, and it's remarkably powerful, such that, you know, first of all, they know who is high and low born, so they know their status, and their status, not only do they know their status, but they know how their status permits them advantages over each other, or disadvantages, depending on where you are. And obviously one of the obvious things, and doesn't take much mapping across to human cultures either, but high status confers on members of the highborn the opportunity to eat first. And it's an order of things that everybody else, no matter how hungry they are, sticks to, which in an animal world seems really weird when you see animals clearly starving, hungry, who will fear of death almost stay back until the higher status monkeys have eaten almost everything, or as much as they want, sometimes almost everything, permitting then, not permitting, then there comes a time after that when the low-born monkeys sort of know it's their turn and they get stuck in and eat the scraps. So, when I think of the royal family, there is still an essence of that, and of course India's caste system is another human version of that, I believe. And I don't know much about it, but I believe it's it basically puts you into a strata of society that has values judged against you if you're low-born or high-born, and out of which you can't move throughout your life. So just as the monkeys do it, we seem to like doing it too. And in 2022, as long as the monarchy still exists, then we are still doing it, because whether we like it or not, let's not just say the royal family, because they do that. Some of them, like the Queen, did a hell of a lot of hard work and conducted herself with decorum and dignity and all those things. But the whole royal kind of the royal entourage, if you like, is full of people who have inherited hereditary wealth and born into wealth and continue into wealth, while a large part of society struggles and isn't born into anything like that wealth. And I guess in that way it is still like the macaque society. We still need, or have needed, to have this kind of status, class, ranking system. And I would have liked to have seen it gone a long time before. But then again, I grew up thinking that really believed that we'd entered an era of ultra intelligent rationality, that superstition, we'd outgrown superstition. We were in the sort of the age of science and reason. We'd been to the moon, we'd put probes out into the far reaches of the solar system, and the science fiction kind of fan in me really had so much hope that was the future of science and reason was upon us. We'd be going ever more that way. And in fact, I suppose the one really disappointing thing for me in life was that it turned out that it's actually not like that at all. In fact, we're in danger of becoming more dominated by superstition, controlled by superstitions and dogmatic views, as opposed to rational thinking and conceptual coherence and logic and things like that. But anyway, but in a way, the Queen, the 60s, 70s, and I thought were going to be that sort of new world. And actually, when you think of the 70s in the UK, they were dark and grim, and actually that sort of progress and all that sort of excitement probably only ever lived in the minds of people like me who were hoping that we'd turned a corner, and the world would be more like Asimov stories. No, they were always full of shenanigans. But you know what I mean. Leave superstition behind. Save the planet by our intelligence and understanding of what we've done so far, and the end to war and the end to tyrannies and things like that. And I was wrong. And I genuinely think, I said to Claire the other day that, if I'm honest, I've never been as pessimistic, actually, about the future as I am now, and I try. You know, I had to say that I'm not unhappy and miserable, depressed, or anything. I actually I don't hold out the hope for the human race to transcend these. I'm not even going to say animal, because they're not animal things. You know, these unenlightened human traits. So I had to really accept that I don't think we're going to get to that brave new world of science and reason, killed by postmodernism, some would argue, by the lazy destructuring brought on by postmodernism, where everything was co-equal and nothing was worth keeping, and anything that had constance and stability was old-fashioned and therefore need to be kind of overturned, and the rules were automatically rejected, broken, but broken without ever having been followed or far less understood and questioned and explored. Anyway, so that's where I stand, and I guess the Queen is sort of a part of that, really. You know, she is of an age where, or she was from an age where I think it's hard for me to separate out this hereditary privilege thing. So the tradition that she brought into the her family brought through into the 20th and now the 21st century. And whether what was their part in this change from the hope for technology and rational thinking? What was her? What did they represent? Tradition, stability, but also inbred power structures. I don't know. It's a weird one. I really didn't have that much time, pay the royal family that much attention, other than the negative press that they've been getting recently for a variety of reasons. I remember that I stood by the side of the Memorial Park in Coventry, near to the town, just by the ring road, somewhere there, and stood on a grassy knoll one day in 78, and she went by in a Queen-mobile, and I remember being quite, not disturbed isn't the right word, but being quite affected by it. You know, when you're a kid and you see royalty, or even royalty, movie stars, even rock stars, there's something quite difficult to deal with when you compare it or set it against your normal life. Try to readjust to normality compared to what you've just witnessed. I think it was she looked, I have to say that as she went by in this buggy with, you know, this black car with a sort of very ugly looking glass dome all around it, she looked lonely and cold. And I think she was either in there on her own or with one person, somebody, you know, some older bloke in a suit, probably the mayor or something, but or her security or whatever. But she looked lonely. being swept through this quite dreary city at the time. Coventry was a harsh place in the 70s. Many people say it didn't get any better, but I don't know. Anyway. And that was, I think, the only time in my lifetime that I saw the Queen in the flesh. And I suppose it imprinted itself on me, and I remember it as an event that stood out, had some significance. But I was never a patriot in that sense, of royalist. It never was in my nature to want to sing a national anthem and ask a God I didn't believe in to take care of a person who really shouldn't have any more right to be taken care of than me or anyone else. And yet the whole idea of asking some divine being to intercede and take care of her, such that if everyone else got wiped away in a 1970s Cold War nuclear exchange, as long as Her Majesty got safely underground, that's all that mattered, sort of thing. Because we had to pray, as children, we had to pray to God to take care of Her Majesty, long to reign over us, to look down upon us in our little worlds that she can never understand because she has never lived them. But nonetheless, I'm sure she felt great responsibility and love for her peoples, including those around the world in the Commonwealth. Without a doubt, she felt and exercised her responsibility, discharged her responsibility. No disputing that. If I could have a time machine, the one time throughout all of her life and or history that she lived through that I would like to see in person is I would like to be tagging along with her and Margaret on the night that they nipped out the palace on Victory in Europe Day, probably VE Day I think it was, and gave the Royal Minders the slip, got out there amongst the hoi polloi and the revellers, and kind of in ordinary garb, so probably wouldn't have been recognised, and evidently survived it and probably had a far better time than anyone in the palace was ever informed about, I imagine anyway. But I'd like to have seen her at that point. That would have been a fun evening, and I'd like to have sort of been able to say, what's it like being born and condemned to this fate? And of course, part of you wants to say, well, it's no different really from the fate, inverted commas, that I'm born into myself. My life, which isn't being a royal member of the royal family, and it is being an average Joe, yada yada. But then again, it's not, because with hers comes this burden of everybody knowing you and you not knowing them, but you have to get used to that, and everybody expecting things from you that other people don't necessarily have expected of them. Being a constant target for enemies, the Germans in the war, or terrorists in peacetime or whatever. So it isn't the same, but it's when you look for the differences, that's where I realised that I wouldn't want to be that the differences are constraints, more or less, really tough constraints that she has had to live by all her life. So, you know, that's a tough job. And of course, the idea that would anyone choose it, or when I say, oh, I wouldn't choose it, well, of course, that's the whole nature of it. You don't, do you? You're born into it if you're one in the 50 odd plus million who happens to be living in that country. Oh, look, you're the one royal princess who's in line to the throne. Well, that was more luckier than winning the lottery by a few billion to 1 chances. So, yeah, you would never know. We'll never know that thing. But the other thing I recognise is that it's, when you, like anything, when you don't know any different, when it's what you were born into, then in a way the beauty of that is you don't know any different, and so it's your normal, and anyone else trying to compare their normal to you as if to make you feel that your normal is somehow special, well, of course it will never work, because your normal just is your normal. She was always a member of a royal family, and that was normal. It would have been totally weird to have been a member of an ordinary family of dock workers in Liverpool or something. That would have been a weird thing. So she have gone, and I think the thing I'm sad about is that there will be an absolute shit ton of cringeworthy gushing going on about the things, the era that she's represented, the times from which she came, where we are now, and what it all means that she's come and gone. And there'll be lots of people. Usually people kind of do that thing of taking the tragedy and hoping that somehow this will turn England around, Britain, and we'll, now with Liz Truss and the new King Charles the Dithering, love him, not probably a very pleasant old bloke, really, but people often go, oh, this is the hope for our future. We'll come back great. Britain will come back great. Now we've Brexited. And it's not about that. There's not something much more fundamental would have to change to get out of the route or the trajectory we're in. So I don't have a lot of hope, but I think there's a pattern, isn't there, that everybody grows up and kind of goes, oh, the times I'm living in are terrible, and we can't go backwards, but it's the future is looking bleak, and it's all changed, and everybody reminisces and thinks it's a gentler, more civil time that they inhabited when they were younger, and from which the Queen Elizabeth II came, and well, it was, but it's not going to go back that way in a hurry. Okay, so this is 9s. This is going to be 9s for Ralph. And this basically is almost all done. I just chatted my way. I did so much cutting up plywood. I was going to tell you why. I never got round to that. The plywood, sawing and sanding and whatever the rest I did to it. Sawing, sanding and complaining was all because, yeah, our fridge broke, and so after pulling it out, it turned out that our fridge was not on this level thing, and now the fact that the damn thing started working again, apparently started working again, I thought what I'm going to do is I'm going to, when I'm at the workshop, I'm going to get some plywood and I'm going to make a piece to fit in level with the rest of the flooring so the fridge doesn't have to fall down a hole and it doesn't end up slightly off the level. So I went into the other room and I marked it all up with my measurements that I'd taken at the fridge the other day. I'm just getting the strings fitted and then I'll come up the other end and do them. So anyway, I did that, and I got to make this unit. The piece, it was two pieces of 9mm ply, and then some 4mm. Really needs to be 22. So yeah, 2 9s 18, and then a 4mm piece of ply, which I made lots of little feet into to give it that extra little lift. So that was quite convenient to get to the right height in the end. So of course, with all things that are a little oddly shaped, I'm going to have to go back and make sure it actually fits. And I glued the two pieces together and the little feet. So with luck, the whole thing should stay as one solid piece. Okay, so we're putting the G on first. I pull the strings tight all the way through and then hold them at the first fret and pull back to the second fret. Now I hear that the stop bar has fallen off, and that's okay, so I'm going to hold this down, and what I want is for the held string to go over the loose string first time round, so I make sure that does that, and then as the loose string comes round I pull it up and I hold keep everything under tension and hold the taut held string and direct it under the loose string this time. So first time it was over the loose string, second time under it, and that then comes round and I go back and I make sure that it's on the saddle and the stop bar is in the right place. The reason I did the middle one first, the G first, and the D I'm doing next, is that those two are central and they keep the adjustable nut on, so it doesn't go anywhere. So this one I can hold here because I'm on the right side, and I keep that taut over the loose one. As it comes round, pull up the loose one and keep the taut one, held one, right under the loose one, and then check it. Whoops! Get the thing on its spot properly and get the string on its roller. And then the same for these. So that puts just enough string onto the post to hold the strings really well, and not so much that it stores up too much unreleased slack. But the stretching process that I will do next is the important thing to get rid of the slack in your strings, and that process, getting rid of the slack in your strings and getting your nut sorted, which we have by putting an adjustable Tusq nut in place. Those two things are what give you permanent tuning stability. So it's nothing to do with your tuners, which is a common misconception. Your tuners are only mechanical things for getting the strings up to tune. Of course, if they're expensive and well geared, they're much smoother and feel more direct and so forth. But once you've got up to tune, those expensive tuners don't in and of themselves have any impact on your tuning stability. That has to do with the unreleased slack in your strings and the quality of your nut slots. So we get rid of I think about it, by the way, as about 50% on each. It's just a good mental mnemonic, I suppose, to keep it in mind. So the nut part is taken care of by using Tusq, because it's Teflon impregnated, or PTFE, whatever you like to call it, and the slots are well cut, and we use the adjustable aspect of it to bring it up to the perfect first fret height without cutting into the slots and possibly reintroducing kind of ragged nuss and friction. So that's getting the nut of the right material with the right well cut slots at the right height. That's half of your tuning stability, and the other half is this business of stretching out the strings once you've fitted them. And it's, people have misconceptions about this. We've all stretched our strings out and then we get on playing, but actually few of us ever realized how much of the slack stays in your string and in your strings, and for how long, even after you've done what you think is enough stretching. And the downside about these slack in your strings is that it will continue to go out of tune, because it only takes a tiny amount of that slack to stretch out to put your guitar annoyingly out of tune. So so that when people give it a couple of stretches and then they go off and play and then still slacken the strings, and to their horror they bend a string or play a lead guitar piece and the thing goes out of tune again and again. And very common that people seek advice on that, and it's very common that people go, oh, you need to change your tuners, and they tell them the best locking tuners. And the locking tuner idea is that somehow a locking tuner, because it locks them, B, because it doesn't wrap a load of wire around the post, somehow those two things will make it more stable. Yeah, it might make it take a little less to pull out the slack. But really, it doesn't really ensure stability by any magic means. And actually, the locking tuner has inherently rubbish aspect, and that is that by definition the locking mechanism is a crushing mechanism. It's very crude. It's a sort of pin that presses down and crushes the string between the pin and the floor of the unit, I suppose, another piece of metal. And by definition, that damages the string in the process of holding it. And it's easy to damage it because there is no way of knowing how hard you should or can get away with doing it. And so we all automatically always damage the string. I have a suspicion that if we didn't do it, if we did it so gently that it didn't damage the string, it wouldn't hold. That's my theory. Because it's by definition you have to use a lot of force to hold it there. So that business of that tendency of the locking tuner to stress and break or half break, seriously damage the string, often results in it breaking, and it certainly breaks if you slack the tuner off to, for example, if you have to take off your bridge and change the saddles around or some really annoying thing like that. And so to me that's a really unhelpful limitation. And since I know that it doesn't have any more stability inherently than what I've just done on these average tuners here, then I know it's a false promise, and it's charging extra money to buy more blingy things that actually won't keep your guitar in tune any better. Funnily enough, I know people who state unequivocally that it has improved their tuning, and it's hard to disprove them, but I don't think it has. Right, there's that done. Now, the last part really of this is to set the intonation, which I find on these roller bridges tends to come in almost perfectly set, usually, but that isn't a guaranteed thing. So we will see. I will support this to keep the jack off the deck. Now, is this making a noise? Is it playing, or has something not worked? Is my wiring faulty? Where's my amp? My little amp. This will be most annoying. I had this working, and now if it's not working, I shall be muchly piddled off. Clean, gain, down, down, tone. Oh. Weird. Ooh. That's not good. What's happened to the... This is weird. This started out being a problem. I thought this was fine. I'd done all my... Oh well, I may have to re-look at this. Now, did I? You know what? I didn't bloody... Didn't I? I've got a horrible feeling that I trusted the switch. That could be a fatal flaw. When I came to do all the redoing. Okay, ooh, what's that hair doing down there? That metal hair. That is a piece of wire sticking out. Okay, that is okay, that's not sticking. Oh. Now here's a little thing. Okay, well, I just noticed something that isn't connected, which is an oversight. But that's okay. I shall connect myself up and take care of it. But I've done everything else, so I will leave you at this juncture. It's often what you find, that you've got something that you forgot to hook up at the time, and then you have to do it later, but that's all right. As long as you find out, and thankfully with electronics it tells you pretty quickly because it doesn't work. So we'll take care of that. Right, I will put that together. Power. Beep. Beep. Power on, power on. Heat up, heat up. Right. Okay, keep that out of the way. I'll use that again in a minute. Okay, well, thanks for watching. I'm going to take care of that, check the switch is working fine, and then we'll kind of go from there. And what I think I'll do at the same time is I will replace the screws with golden ones. There's a mixture of things going on. There were some jaded, tarnished golden ones, but I'll replace them anyway. Right, anyway, I'll see you again on the occasion of Her Majesty's passing. This guitar will have been finished on that day.